Hello. I decided to continue a little bit of BLISS Afterlife, a story I started writing 15 years ago. I have a feeling these chapters were written maybe around 2009 or 10, and I am now at chapter 53. BLISS Afterlife is a story about reincarnation, which I wrote on and off over 15 years. Chapter 53, Ben and Fay. Ben is the grandson of BLISS. Ben and Faye were sitting at Susan's kitchen table. His mum was cooking dinner for all of them. His uncle Chris was in the refuge for the next few days, and his mum was at home. They still had a lot to talk about, and Susan wanted to know all about Faye's parents, particularly her mum. Acupuncture was something she did not know much about, and so there was a lot Faye had to say on the subject. Susan had always been quite open to holistic therapies. With a mum like Bliss and Holly being of similar mindset, there had always been talk in the family about the wrongness of oversubscribing and the like. Faye never knew any other way to heal the body than to resort to herbs and acupuncture, as she had grown up that way. She had felt very passionate about her studies and was looking forward to working in practice. They will have a lot to organize when the baby arrived. She had finished her studies, but was looking forward to being a mum. She intended to find a part-time job with a clinic near her hometown. But presently she was here and enjoying getting to know Ben's mum better. So, can we meet Dad here, Mum? Ben wanted to sort this out. It would be better if he and Faye were alone when Steve, his dad, would arrive. Yes, love, I shall go to the refuge in the morning, and I intend to be there all day. I have paperwork to do, as you know, some are moving out, and I shall have a busy day after the break I've had since you arrived. I'm glad you're meeting him. Give him my regards, please. Thanks, Mum. I prefer to see him here. I wonder how he will take becoming a granddad. Ben smiled. His dad never liked getting old. He will have to adjust being an OP. He felt excited now, telling him he hoped his dad would be happy for him. Have you got any recording of your dad's music? Faye had meant to ask this ages ago. She had heard a bit about Ben's dad, but not much. Yes, of course, Mum. Do you still have the old recordings? I do. In fact, I have them on CD. They remastered some of their old stuff, and it sounds good. He does quite regular gigs again now, but I have no idea if he's recording anything. Well, you shall see him tomorrow. Here it is. I used to love this one. I've not listened to it for ages. Ben took the CD which showed his dad and the other 3 band members leaning against a fancy red car. He put it in the player, and when the music started, the memories flooded back. He remembered this song so well. His dad was playing it a lot at home to practice when he was 10 or so, and he used to sit and watch him. Oh, memories, eh, Mum? He took his mum in his arms. Yes, darling, makes me feel all melancholic. But I do love my life, and I do hope your dad is doing well. We had some good times. I know, yes, we did. I wonder if he's grown up. Ben laughed. His dad was a restless man. He remembered that. He also knew that he was himself someone who liked change, and he was excited to live in China when the baby was arriving. Endless possibilities for discoveries. He took Faye's hand and pulled her close, embracing both his mum and girlfriend. He felt so good and was happy that all had gone so well for him so far, and this visit for his wife-to-be. The music fitted so well. It was a song about love and summer and being happy, and he looked at his mum, and she beamed back at him. Okay, let's eat, guys. I want this place tidy when your dad sees it tomorrow. They all sat down and ate and continued reminiscing. Chapter 54. Steve meets Faye. Steve had got up really early. He had woken up at the crack of dawn and could not get back to sleep. He felt excited to see Ben and his new girlfriend. He suddenly couldn't fathom why he had not been in touch more in recent times. He loved his son, and somehow he had been quite wrapped up in himself, sometimes even forgetting about Ben's progress. When he and Susan separated, everything was so different. It wasn't so easy to keep in touch. Ben had school and projects and friends, and somehow Steve had felt guilty for leaving. He really had been a shit in those days. Why he did not keep up regular contact he couldn't say. Somehow Ben knew he loved him. He was lucky that Ben was such a curious and interesting young man. Why had he neglected to think about him more? Susan had always accused him that he was able to just shut things out and continue his own way, regardless of who was involved. Sometimes he felt he made his life more difficult for himself. Well, we all do, he thought, remembering his talks with Bliss. He had been really fond of her, and she was so unconventional sometimes, and she would talk quite straight. When he was with her, somehow things made a bit more sense. He remembers a conversation when all the separation issues were full on. He had just moved out of the family home and had visited Bliss in her flat. She was sad for everybody, really. Susan was her daughter, and she was aware of the tendency he had to stray. And when Ben was little, she had some strong words to say when he had a brief affair. She knew they had a lot of arguments prior to their final breakup, and he felt it was even worse for Ben to see his parents' marriage so difficult. Probably more difficult than a clean breakup would have been. Bliss felt sorry for him. He had always been far too flattered by female attention, and Bliss saw this as a real weakness. But she never judged him or tried to persuade him to try again. Susan had had enough of him anyway. But he felt compassion from Bliss. He wished he could talk to her now. He had been doing a lot of delving and had some miserable times. He was glad that he and Susan talked again occasionally, and both had moved on. Until he met Sylvana, he had not even thought he could actually fall in love again. Not that he didn't have a number of liaisons, but he never really felt as if he could be completely himself with any of the girlfriends he briefly had. He became quite disillusioned, and when he started to work on his musical career again, he focused on that completely and preferred his own company. Music was such a big part of his life, and he felt so glad that somehow he managed to get back to playing live events. He had been writing a lot of music, and his guitar playing was very much better than it was when he was performing all that time ago. He had developed his own style much more. He gave his Indian heritage more rein and incorporated it with his music, which gave it a particular sound which seemed to go down well. Sylvana was a lot in his head. She was so busy with her own life. He never felt she needed him, which made him want to see her more often. Aren't we funny creatures, he thought, getting dressed. He put one of his own songs on and sang along, ready to meet his new son, soon-to-be daughter-in-law. He had not got a reply to his text from Sylvana and decided to give her a ring before he set off to London. Firstly a shower and getting dressed. Once he was done, he checked himself in the tall hall mirror, trying to see himself as Faye might. His jeans and white shirt looked neat, and he had just recently had a haircut. He was worried he was a bit short. The hair was a bit short, but he thought he didn't look too bad for a man in his 60s. He drew his belly in. Thankfully his stomach was fairly trim. Playing again and being active had put him back into shape, and he felt if he lost just a few pounds he would almost be back to the weight he was in his 20s. He felt a bit vain, scrutinizing his looks and he felt, despite his slightly receding hairline, he still looked all right. The grey bits looked quite sophisticated, he thought, and he obviously was always tanned. He smiled. Nothing wrong in liking yourself, that's what Sylvana always said to him. She looked great for her age. According to her, drummers didn't get old. Well, somehow he hoped he would be around to vouch for that. He would give her a ring now and then set off. It only rang once, and she answered. "Sylvana, how are you? I mentioned in my text that I was off to London today to see my son and his new love. Everything okay?" "Yes, fine. Lovely to hear from you. I was out till late last night, had my monthly circle, and somehow only saw your text this morning. I hope you have a great time. Must be exciting to meet your future daughter-in-law." I have no idea if marriage is in the pipeline, but she seems very important to him. Yes, I can't wait. We'll set off now. I shall come back tonight, but not sure when. Why don't you come to me when you're back? I shall not go to bed early anyway. Just text me when you know what you're doing. I have no big plans today and shall do some art and taking my dog out and but it would be lovely to see you tonight. Ah, Sylvana, I'm so glad you said that. Would be lovely to see you afterwards, and, well, just stay over. You make me blush, Stevie boy. Yes, great. If you want to eat something with me, let me know. I guess you have no idea what the plan is. Is there a plan? Not really, I'm not sure. I'll take it as it comes. Once I know how the land lies, something to look forward to. See you later then. Steve smacked his lips for a kiss. Bye-bye. Sylvana responded with an exaggerated kissing noise. Steve got his keys, patted his jacket to make sure he had his wallet, etc., and locked the door behind himself, giving the hall a satisfied look as he admired the 2 pictures Sylvana had made for him and given to him. They were lovely, and even though not the usual pictures he had on his walls, he loved them. She loved the sea and the beach, and she made pictures with all sorts of little things she found in nature or in charity shops. They shine golden, as she usually had a golden background and always had a message. Feed your soul with joy. And the other one, allow yourself to do things that make your heart sing. He was glad she was in his life. He had brought a couple of CDs which he loved to listen to in the car. One of them was his own recent release. Some old tracks and some new ones. He loved listening to in the car and set off with his own music in his ears. Happy things looked on the happy things, he thought, one of the titles of his songs. Things are looking up. Chapter 55. At Susan's house. Susan had just left the house to get to the refuge when Faye suddenly felt all dizzy. Ben was thankfully right behind her in the kitchen and caught her when he saw her swaying. "Ah, thanks, Ben. I felt a bit faint all of a sudden." "I know, I could see you were losing your balance. Come on, sit down, love. How are you feeling now?" "Gosh, don't scare me like that." He could see the color was returning to her cheek. She'd gone so pale in such a short time. "Phew, I'm feeling a bit better. A glass of water, please." And yes, a cup of tea would be great. Ben helped her sit in the coziest chair and fetched some water out of his mum's jug. "Here you are. What happened?" "Thanks, love." Faye drank almost the whole glass in one go and breathed deeply in and out with her hands on her belly. "I don't really know. Suddenly all strength seemed to have left me and I felt all faint. Oops. Baby is kicking now." "Oh, I'm so glad. Everything seems fine. Feeling much better already. I don't know what this was. Just let me be here for a bit and gather myself." Ben heard the kettle click and went to make the tea. His heart was still pounding, but he seemed to feel calmer now, and he stopped to take a few breaths. He poured himself a glass of water and sat on the stool, watching Faye, who had closed her eyes and had put one hand on her heart and the other on the top of her belly. He could see her breathing deeply and visibly relaxing. He loved her so much, and the thought of something happening to her or the baby started his heart pounding again. A few more deep breaths for myself, he thought. Don't even go there. He got up, put some music on. The room felt all tense and anxious. He needed to hear something uplifting. His dad's latest. Starts with a really sunny, happy tune. He didn't know this one well, heard it yesterday for the first time, and the opening bars already lifted his mood. Every cloud has a silver lining. He hummed along with it. The melody was very easy to remember. His dad had a real good touch here, and he was now really getting excited to meet him and see him again. "How are you feeling now, love?" He kneeled down in front of Faye, who smiled at him. "Better. I have that tea now, please." "Your dad's really good. I loved that song straight away yesterday, and you're a clever bunny for putting that on." Steve had gone to make the tea. He needed one too. He brought them over and sat at Faye's feet, had tea on a little side table, and she took a sip. "Oh, gosh, I love a cup of tea, me." Faye took a sip too, and he felt so much better already. Ben got up to get them some biscuits. He somehow thought a bit of sweetness would be nice. "Oh, yes. For me too, please. A chocolate one, please. Thank you." Isn't that funny how the sip of a hot cup of tea makes you feel a little restored? Faye laughed, munching her biscuit. "I wonder what that was all about." I can feel the baby moving and my heart feels back to normal. Do you think I should worry about this? No, darling, you shouldn't worry about anything. But let's speak to my mum later and Holly. They're both mums and they see a lot. Let's not worry. Maybe your blood pressure is a little low. Yes, maybe. And it has all been quite exciting. Maybe I was overwhelmed. She laughed. Actually, that's somehow how she had felt. But she didn't want to eat too much. She didn't want to read too much into it. She felt fine now, after tea and biscuit. She stroked Ben's hair. He had lovely hair. I wonder what his dad looks like. Impatient now to meet him. Chapter 56. Sylvana. When Sylvana had said goodbye to Steve, she felt herself again feeling this feeling of utter joy. She did really like Steve. She felt a pang of anxiety. She was in her 50s, and suddenly she felt 24 again. Steve reminded her so much of Hardy. She had been so in love with him. She called him Hardy, as that was his favourite author at the time. She had come over to England from Austria when she was 23, and he was her big love. In fact, they had met on a holiday. Well, he was on holiday with his motorbike, and they finally ran into each other at a wine festival near Basel. He lived on the south coast of England, and not long after they parted, she decided that improving her English was a good reason to go over to England for a year or so. He was part German, and they got on really well. As it turned out, he had another girlfriend by the time she moved over to England permanently, but she had never regretted coming over, and she got married to Frank a few years later. They had a lovely daughter who was 25 now, and although single again, she was glad to live here in Brighton. Sylvanas divorce happened 4 years ago, and although strange at first, she had settled back into single life quite well. After 21 years of marriage, she had had a really stable emotional life, she felt, until it ended. They had got on well most of the time, although she had definitely felt the boredom creeping in. They knew each other almost too well, and at some point had lost interest in each other. She had started her new direction of music facilitation, and he forever had his nose in a book. Until he met Christina, and there he was bowled over. She decided that they had had their good times and started an affair, and he had started an affair which then put the death nail into their relationship. The last 4 years had been very different. It took her some time to date again, but she had had a couple of relationships, as she liked to call them, to herself. They were liaisons. Both started quite exciting, but she realized last year that she needed more time on her own. When she found herself arguing with her last boyfriend, she knew that it was not going to last, and finished that relationship quite quickly. Anyhow, 4 months of fun was not bad. She smiled. And now, Steve. She was worried she was only infatuated with him because he looked and talked a bit like Hardy. In fact, he quite liked Thomas Hardy. He liked reading as much as she did, and their conversation was always great, as were a lot of other things. But she felt a little worried in herself. He was really nice looking, tall and handsome. She smiled again, and being in a band, always plenty of female attention. How well did she really know him? He might just fancy a little fling, and she certainly didn't want to get herself into an emotional state about a guy who had a roaming eye. She couldn't help starting to whistle, though. He had talked about his son quite a lot to her, and obviously she talked about Poppy to him. She was glad he had a son. It would be hard to be with somebody who had never had the experience of parenthood. Her daughter was so important to her, and she would never want to apologize for the prime spot she had in her heart for her. Thankfully, Steve loved his son, and with all the developments there, they will have a lot to talk about. She was going to give Poppy a ring tonight and fill her in. Her daughter was just going through a quite tough period. She didn't like her job, and it will be really good to have a chat with her. She sat down on her laptop, humming along to the CD Steve had given her. He was bloody good, she thought. I wonder what his ex-wife is like. He was married for 12 years or so, but divorced ages ago. She decided not to give that another thought. She was determined to take things at its own pace. She had so much on her plate at the moment that she was hoping Steve would complement that nicely instead of resisting the fun they could have, as her last boyfriend had continuously. It's a funny thing how we like a man to be confident but not rigid. I'd better do some gardening. My mind is straying to unwanted territory. She had all day and probably most of the evening to do her stuff. She hummed to herself, thinking of Steve's lovely long brown hands. He was a lovely dancer, and the first man who just took her and danced with her around the kitchen when a lovely song came on the radio the last time he was around. He completely bowled her over with his smooth dancing. She had always loved dancing, but many guys were just not so confident. Never mind just pulling her off the chair, smooching in the kitchen. She found herself hugging herself. Okay, change of clothes, she thought, and set off downstairs to her garden, letting her dog out ahead of her. He was already waiting at the door. She could swear he could read her mind. That was chapter 55. The next one will be chapter 56, and it will be Ben and Fay again.